Stitch by stitch, generation by generation, the pinecone quilt lives on through the makers who pass along knowledge well worth preserving. This is America 250 by Betty Ford Smith. A retired educator, Ford Smith didn't learn to quilt until later in life, but she was introduced to sewing at a young age.
So my mom taught me to sew when I was about maybe 12, 13, 14 years old. She bought my first sewing machine for me when I was 16. But I couldn't have a sewing machine until I learned to hand sew first. Then as school went on, I was in middle school. My 6th grade, 7th grade home economics teacher really gave us some great sewing lessons, and I really enjoyed sewing classes and my lessons, and that propelled me to go on to want to be a fashion design major. So I went on to college. You had to sew some more. So I had all that experience from my mother and my home economics teacher. Now, you mentioned quilting. I never even looked at quilts when I was in high school or even in college. I didn't think of it. In fact, in college, I was crocheting, like most young ladies in the 60s and 70s. We were just crocheting when we went to classes. And the sewing classes, you had to do that to make your designs to present to your teachers for that.
In 2004, Ford Smith became interested in learning to quilt, jumping straight into labor-intensive pinecone quilts.
So this design, the pinecone quilt, was shown to me by a young woman at a fair that I was doing in Sebring around the circle. And she came to me one day and got out of her car and said, "Can you come over here for a minute and make this 2 quilts I just bought?" And it was the design that I had never seen before, and so colorful. And it was circular, sort of like the pine cone. And I said, "Oh, where'd you get that?" And she said, "Up the street, this little old lady, I bought 2 of these." So she finally took me there. We go to her house, and I met Miss Sue. Arlene Dennis was her name. And she was a tiny little lady. And she looked at me kind of strange, like, "What are you doing here? Do you really want to learn how to do this?" And I told her, "I've never seen anything like this, and I just love the design of that. I would like to learn. Did you ever teach anybody before?" And she said, "No." I said, "Has anyone ever asked you?" She said, "No." So I said, "Well, I would like for you to please teach me how to make this pinecone quilt." I made my first quilt in 3 months, and she was so proud of me, and I was so proud of myself. And she laughed and laughed because every time I'd come over there, I would spend hours sitting with this first quilt. But then my second quilt, I didn't go as many times. I wanted to see how much I could do on my own. It makes me almost want to cry because I just can't get over what she taught me, this wonderful skill. And I didn't think I'd be using it still to this day.
In March 2008, Ford Smith traveled to Boykin, Alabama, also known as Gee's Bend, a relatively isolated African-American majority community with a long tradition of quilting. There, she befriended celebrated quilters and developed a deeper understanding of the craft while refining her own style and techniques. Pinecone quilts are unique 3-dimensional textiles made up of thousands of hand-cut fabric pieces that are folded. In contrast to traditional quilts that have a top, a middle of batting, and a backing, pinecone quilts skillfully achieve both structure and warmth from the volume of the densely layered fabrics. The pattern is inspired by nature. The concentric circles echo pinecone scales, as well as the rotation of stars around a galactic core, or the whorls of one's fingerprint. Historically, quilts were powerful examples of thrifty upcycling and ingenuity, often made from discarded commercial cloth sack bag remnants, old clothing or sheets, or leftover fabric scraps. The tradition of using new fabric emerged around the 1950s, notably among the renowned quilters of Gee's Bend, Alabama, and allowed for more artistic freedom. Pinecone quilts in the United States are also known as pine burr, cocklebur, or cuckleburl, target, bullseye, Arkansas burr, and Lumbee pinecone. In the United Kingdom, a common variation is Somerset star. The name used by these artists often reflect the relationship between language, geography, and nature. Like the artistry and craft of quilting, the different names have been passed down and adapted. America 250 is about 65 by 66 inches and weighs 25 pounds. While most quilts are meant to be laid on a bed, this quilt was meant for display on a wall, with a sleeve for hanging sewn on the back.
My inspiration for the Appleton quilt was the fact that we had the 250th anniversary coming up. So I thought, okay, red, white, and blue. So I went to these places and started looking at fabrics that I knew I could fold into different shapes and still see enough of the design and enough of the message that I wanted to put. I tried to make it 26 to go with the 2026, but I'm not sure I made 26. I know it's about 23, 24 different fabrics that are in this quilt. But I have lots of stars and stripes, zigzags. I picked some fabric that had wonderful words on it. Brave and glorious, free, cars and trucks. I thought about the farmers years ago. And the farmers always had bandanas hanging out of their jeans. So when I saw the bandana in red and white, I thought that would go well in this. I watch a lot of old black and white movies. I love old movies. You always see the old cars and the old trucks and agriculture. I mean, without all the food and the farms that we had, 250 years. And then we can go into the railroad. I couldn't find any trains that were red, white, and blue, unfortunately. So I just went with the cars. I thought the old cars would remind people that a lot of people had old jalopies and old trucks way back then. And I think some of it came from, I watched The Grapes of Wrath too many times, so that might be part of it too. Just everything I could think of for 250 years of America. This quilt took me 4 months to make. I started in the center with red, and then for the very center, I wanted to make sure I used all of my 20 plus different fabrics. So I put each one in until I used them all up before I started again. And then some, I had a little more yardage. And then usually I buy 3 yards of something, but I bought 4 yards just to make sure I'd have enough. And I still didn't have enough because once I get midway, it takes over 100 little squares just to make one row. So I knew that, okay, I would count out how much I have. I would cut as I go. I don't usually cut all of it at once. I would cut that one design, so I might use all my flag and cut up 50 pieces, count how many I need, and then do another row. Now I don't usually have to count, but because this was red, white, and blue, and I wanted to finally get some red, white, and blue in here, I decided that I needed to make sure I had enough. And then I really wanted my red, white, and blue to stand out, so I did a row of red, white, and blue. Quilters will realize how hard it is to find true red fabric. Oh, it's one of the hardest things. And if you run out, you go back, you can't match it. You have to get it all in one shot. So I didn't have quite enough to do that design over and over again, but I got that in there. And then I wanted white, but I didn't want a solid white. So I found a piece of white, but there's flags in here. And finally, you fill in the corners with whatever you can get too. I've never made one on a machine, and I don't intend to make one on a machine. I like just sitting still and going round and round in a circle and putting my pieces on one at a time. Plus, I like the silence. The sewing machine kind of gets on my nerves now when I hear that bzzz sound. And it's like meditation. To make my pine cone quilt, I start with a piece of fabric. I like to start with an old sheet. Then I put a pin what I think is the center. You take 4 pieces, and I cut it all in my lap. So now I'm finger pressing, and I would lay the first piece down. Then I fold the next piece, and then you have to go the same direction. And I would pin each piece down with a straight pin, and I've sewed them down.
When placing the second layer, Fort Smith tries her best to form the shape of a star before moving on to the next layers.
And this would be the next row. So I drop it down a little bit and go right in between here. If you're too far over, you'll leave a gap. And if you drop it too low, then you can see the stitches, and you don't want to see the stitches either. It's not always this uniform either. Some stitches are longer, some are short. But the idea is to just keep going around in the same direction, and they overlap. The edges are nicely trimmed. Then you put your binding on. You just run a stitch all the way up. Then you fold it over and you flip over the edge and you pull it nice and tight. So I put a couple of pins in and then I just do a little flip stitch.
Fort Smith is also an avid collector of historical quilts. Her knowledge of antique quilts blending with contemporary techniques to create her patchworks. She also educates others on how to make pinecone quilts.
It's so important to me that young people learn to sew, first of all. And then quilting is something that is so relaxing. It can help us through the bad times, the good times. They make wonderful gifts for people. And I've had some students, when I teach them, say, oh, I want to teach my granddaughter how to do this, or I want to teach my mother how to do this. I love the fact that they want to share it with somebody else. Start small and start simple. That would be my advice to a beginning quilter.
Fort Smith is like a running stitch that joins the layers together, connecting the past, present, and future of quilting.